Hi, Jeremy Cordeaux in the Court of Public Opinion. I'm just on air here to let you know that we'll be live streaming the Court of Public Opinion every Friday between 9 o'clock and 12 on jeremycordeaux.com. Please join us. We'd love to have you.
Talking About Marketing is a podcast for business owners and leaders, produced by my dad, Steve Davis, and his colleague at Talked About Marketing, David Olney, in which they explore marketing through the lens of their own 4 Ps: person, principles, problems, and perspicacity. Yes, you heard that correctly. Apart from their love of words, they really love helping people. So they hope this podcast will become a trusted companion on your journey in business.
David, have I got an offer for you?
Oh, no.
What is it that you need most in the world?
I think what I need most in the world is a cafe near home that serves Afghan kebabs, Spanish tapas, and high-quality Italian wine.
Okay, maybe I haven't got what you're looking for. And so...
Try and sell it to me anyway.
Yes. Well, no, there you go. I actually made the point I was hoping to make, where a salesperson rushes forward thinking what they've got is the answer before they've actually listened to what the heck the market was interested in. Mind you, I'd go away and do some product innovation and some market testing to see if that combination has legs.
And conclude that I'm a market of one and probably just laugh at me.
A little bit, but that's what makes the day go round. This is Series 3, which we're embarking on. They said it would never happen as well. And we are diving in for the whole series in our last segment of Perspicacity into an amazing stream of sales discussion. But first, let's look after the person listening to this in just a moment with our first segment to kick off Episode 1, Series 3.
Our 4 Ps. Number 1, person. The aim of life is self-development, to realise one's nature perfectly. That is what each of us is here for. Oscar Wilde.
Fame. Fame makes a man take things over. Fame lets him lose hard to swallow. Fame puts you where things are hollow. Fame, not your brain, it's just a flame. Those were the immortal words of David Bowie, David Olney.
It just caused me pain. They were not good rhymes.
They weren't, were they?
No, I think that must have been the heroin phase.
Well, it was a huge hit, of course, Fame, but perhaps the trick was you didn't really listen to the words.
No, all the years of listening to that song have never worked out the words were that bad.
Yes, and the reason I mention it is because fame and wrestling with what that means is a major theme. Well, in fact, it's something that our whole society is marinated in. It reminds me of the old Palmolive dishwashing TV commercials where Madge goes into a beauty salon and the beauty consultant soaks the lady's fingers in this green liquid, which is the detergent, which I introduced my daughters to. They couldn't believe advertising of the 1970s after seeing that. But this whole world is immersed in the elusive nature of fame on one hand, and of course we had the 15 minutes of fame, Andy Warhol, which, dangles that carrot just out of reach that people strive for. But now we have the mass-produced garden variety fame with a reality TV show for just about everything that manufactures people into something easy for media companies to flush through their system. It really is a time in history where fame has been commoditized, don't you think, David?
I think fame has always been important, but this idea now that it's the easiest and cheapest media to make, it just has taken something that is a part of being human. We always want to know what's cool and what's interesting, but now everyone can find a way to be cool or interesting in a way that doesn't last and doesn't really tell us anything useful about how to thrive, how to be the best version of ourselves. It's just this very ugly form of commodification.
And I mention this because many of us are all caught up in it when we dabble on social media as part of doing the marketing for whatever entity we're with, or whether it's our personal brand. It's easy to go off track and start moving towards this. And I'm mentioning this because I want to share a thought from the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, which I'm about halfway through at the moment. It's been a really interesting thing to feast on in between other books, is going back to this, turned into a philosopher, really. I mean, you like him a lot, don't you, David?
I do. Like, to have a Roman emperor who made the decision that despite he had all that power, he decided to behave. He didn't use and abuse and destroy and corrupt in the way that so many Roman emperors did. And the fact that we really have his personal diary of how he tried to stay on track as emperor and resist doing the easy thing or doing the thing that could be fun for a moment but would cause harm for other people or cause harm later. Such an interesting thing to have so much power and to choose by the standards of the people in his role to probably be one of the most ethical and together of the emperors of Rome ever.
Yes, because it's not what we commonly understand happens with power, because they say power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Who was that? George Orwell, I believe.
I think so.
So I mention this because of this lure of fame in our social media dabblings. What he brings to the table is a way to get over ourselves a little bit and put things into perspective, albeit in a rather grand and profound way, by his meditation on how much the seeking of fame is vanity when you consider our mortality. Let's have a listen to this little excerpt.
Look down from above on the countless herds of men and their countless solemnities, and the infinitely varied voyagings in storms and calms, and the differences among those who are born, who live together and die. And consider, too, the life lived by others in olden time, and the life of those who will live after you, and the life now lived among barbarous nations, and how many know not even your name, and how many will soon forget it, and how they who perhaps now are praising you will very soon blame you, and that neither a posthumous name is of any value, nor reputation, nor anything else.
It's pretty dour for today's tastes, isn't it, David, to ground our sweeping away for a moment's flurry of clicks and likes, etc., to think, well, actually, we might not be here tomorrow. And if we're not, how long will we be remembered? It's something we don't tend to dwell upon. It seems too extreme in today's age. Would you agree?
Absolutely. It seems to me that where we're stuck today is we've thought that vanity is the path to immortality. And, we've done the opposite of what Marcus Aurelius worked out with so much power. He could have done vain things that changed the world and left it in a worse state. And yet with all that power, he had the insight to realize that vanity was not the path to go down. If you've got power, if you've got the ability to change things, you better do them for a more reasonable thing, because that in the long run is really what will last. Is that if you have an effect on the world that is positive, that's the bit that will stick.
I suppose for us, as people running businesses or leading them, it's an interesting thing to ponder. We can flash about and get some likes, maybe get a little sale or two extra, or we could dig deeper to the eternal, in quoted commas, aspects of what we do, where whatever our entity is actually makes an impact on the world, do the hard yards there and possibly have much more of a sustainable outcome from that effort, which I think is meeting Marcus Aurelius where he'd like us to be. But even then, he'd probably say, you're thinking too much about your legacy and you're not thinking about doing the right thing in the moment. What I take from this, if you get a chance to read or listen to the meditations, is it just keeps us holding on to what's current rather loosely. certainly enjoy and make do with what we have, but know that it could change or go away, which on the day of recording, the Twitter icon on my phone disappeared, got swapped over by Elon and his munchkins to an X as he rebrands Twitter as X, which made me write a reflection on the Talked About Marketing website about the transitory nature of all things, particularly social media. He is not quite Marcus Aurelius nature, is he, Elon Musk? David?
I don't think Marcus would be pleased.
What would Marcus do about it?
As emperor, depending on how annoying he was, quite possibly have him beheaded.
Okay. Well,
Again, it's not like Marcus wasn't capable of extreme violence. He just tried to do it for decent reasons.
well, there you go. There's two takeouts for today. One, a posthumous execution
Of Elon Musk by Marcus Aurelius.
Yes.
So time-bending mayhem here.
Or more practically for us, if we do find ourselves just getting caught up in the frenzy of keeping an eye on the fame scoreboard, maybe a little dose of Marcus Aurelius keeps our feet on the ground.
Our 4 Ps. Number 2, principles. You can never be overdressed or overeducated. Oscar Wilde.
In the principles section for this episode, we're turning to a book that I stumbled upon by Ray Edwards. It's called How to Write Copy That Sells. And I thought I'd have a look at it because in helping people with their marketing, and especially doing a lot of blogging workshops and coaching at the moment, yes, we want to lead by helping, but at some point along the journey, making sure that what we're sharing is conveyed in a compelling way made me have a look to see what other writers and thinkers in the sphere have come up with. And Ray Edwards is one. He's come across your radar, particularly through the States, David.
Yeah, it's a case of I had heard of him before you read it, and I thought, oh, one day I've got to have a look. But I hadn't had a specific reason to have a look until you started listening to it. And then I jumped in as well and went, oh, finally a sort of high-profile US copywriter who is actually teaching you what you need rather than teaching you how clever they think they are.
Yeah, it's a thin little book.
And it's just what you need. It's not, aren't I amazing? It's here's what you need to write better copy. And here's some proof it works, but without wasting half the book on. And you could be like me, or you could pay for a big seminar, or you could pay for a 3-day workshop. It's very much someone who's been so successful that he can afford to help by putting a book out rather than by the book having to become the new revenue stream.
Exactly. This is an encapsulation of a person's career, their work. Interestingly, and we have to be mindful of this when we read thinkers from America, is many of them are one arm's length removed from their church. References to their church life are part and parcel of their business life, almost worn like a badge of honor, to the extent that he has a copywriting framework, which he talks about in this book, called the PASTOR framework, and that's PASTOR. We're not talking about pasta.
Yeah, I was hoping it was noodles, and then it wasn't.
No. And so I thought I'd just whip through those pretty quickly to give you a sense of whether or not this has use for you as something to ponder. Not a very expensive book either. And I ended up listening to it and then buying it to have a copy just on my desk to flick through from time to time.
Most of us were taught the old advertising acronym AIDA, attention, interest, desire, action. And for most copywriters and marketers, we have been taught to focus on the fear of loss, the fear of missing out, and making people worry, inflaming, putting more fuel on the fire of worry and fear in order to sell things, to get people's attention. I even have a framework that I developed called the PASTOR framework. And the intention of developing that in versus AIDA is that pastor is a word. It's not about being a preacher, by the way. It's not about religion. It's about being a shepherd, which is the original meaning of the word pastor. And the idea was to approach writing copy as if you're shepherding someone to a good decision that is to their benefit. And I believe if you think about what a shepherd does, the shepherd cares for the flock, protects them, keeps the predators away, makes sure they have food and water. And we know the story culturally, the good shepherd laid down his life for the sheep. If we approach writing copy and the sales and marketing process from that point of view, then we're never going to be pushy or manipulative or using fear-based tactics to sell things. We're going to be thinking about the flock.
So P is for person, problem, and pain. He's basically saying if we're going to write any copy that connects with people, we've got to identify with the person you're trying to reach, understanding the problem you're solving for them and the pain that that problem causes. Now, this is not rocket science, but it's a handy framework to get the starting point right, which is why we look at the persona, the person you're dealing with, the things that relate what you do to a need they have, in particular the amplification of the pain, which you'll see is a recurring theme for this season in our final section when we look at sales. So A of pasta is for amplify and aspiration. So once you've identified the person, the problem, the pain they feel, then you've got to amplify the consequences if they don't solve it. If they're going to languish with this pain, what are the consequences of that? Just to make sure that they're ready to take action. S is for story, solution, and system. So once you've described the problem, you've amplified the consequences, you've painted the picture of paradise now. So you're sharing the story of how you can apply a solution to move from this place of languishing in pain to the place where you could be. T is for transformation and testimony, he says. And I'll just quote here. He says, remember that whatever you're selling, whether it's a home study program, see, there's his church thing there, a book, a seminar, your consulting services, anything at all, what people are buying is not the stuff, it's the transformation. Which taps into Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, doesn't it, David? Where the main thing that happens in any great story is that the hero is transformed.
Yep, if the hero doesn't change, people lose interest, because if the hero was perfect, well, why would you be interested in what they did?
So you've got that, and then, of course, they're ready to hear your offer, which is the O in pasta. So you've got to let them know exactly what it is you're offering for sale. Here's exactly what you're going to get. And R is for the response. So he says this is one of the areas where copy tends to often be the weakest, the response request. We're asking the customer to buy, and he says you shouldn't be shy at this point about making that request. How does that pasta framework sit for you?
I really liked it when I read the book because it was only the things you needed in the order you needed them in. It really brought together the understandings of all the work I'd done on inbound marketing for my master's thesis. It really linked a whole pile of stuff I'd learnt working with Speakeasy marketing in Texas. It just was this wonderful book where I could see where all these pieces came from, where all these pieces fit, but it was so well constructed to make life easier for a copywriter or for someone writing some content for their website or writing a blog post or coming up with an intro or a description for a podcast. It was just the best short how-to book I've crashed into yet in now 3 years of rapid pace learning about this stuff.
And I will just point out too that it all the way through, it's broken down with really simple summaries. Like at the end of chapter 3, he's even got his 5 headline templates to make more sales. So that's the how-to headline, the transactional headline, the reason why headline, the probing question headline, and the if-then headline. It really is a no BS book when someone is actually trying to give you the good oil.
Yeah, it reminds me of when we did the episode on Josh Bernoff, talking about no BS language and writing. And it's the wonderful thing, once you've read that book, to have someone who is a fabulous writer, and Ray Edwards is, his copy's great, who's not wasting words or going off on sidetracks that don't help. It's a very spare book. Everything that is there to help you and has a reason to be in the book.
Yeah, so there you go. Something you might want to ponder if you're looking for an accessible book to sit by you. It's called How to Write Copy That Sells. We make not a one single cent from this recommendation. We just think there's good content there by Ray Edwards.
Our 4 Ps. Number 3, problems. I asked the question for the best reason possible. Simple curiosity. Oscar Wilde.
I'm looking into the inbox and for this problem segment, something that's rearing its head as people look more closely at some of the emails, especially the ones that sit in the updates tab, or they might even be in the spam folder. And these are notes from Google about your Google Analytics setup. As we know, as of July the 1st this year, 2023, Google had shut down the old version of Google Analytics and made Google Analytics 4 the only version that is collecting data. As a result of that, if you hadn't made any changes, I mean, Google has this approach to its alerts that they are hysterical. If you watched Lost in Space, danger, danger, the robot waving its arms around and its lights blinking on and off, that's what they're all like, which is good in theory, but because we tend to see so many of them, it's the boy cried wolf. And they look spammy. And I'm getting a number of people saying, oh, what's happening here? I'm getting this message saying I haven't completed this change. And sometimes people had set up a Google Analytics 4 account, and it is actually okay, but they've got the old Google Analytics 3 sitting side by side. They didn't have one or the other. They had both for a while. And so these error messages aren't smart. They're dumb messages. So really, you need to breathe deeply and read through the fine print. Obviously, if you've got someone who is your tech person, run it past them just to solve it. Because sometimes, as with a number of Google alerts, it can be much ado about nothing. There's not much else to say on that one.
No, only that Google historically, I think, has wrote more and more dramatic emails because in the main, we know we don't quite understand it. We know we go, I'm not sure I know what I want to do. So now they don't even wait and build up to the hysteria. They start with it.
Yes. And the other thing to round this off, this morning I was actually emailing a client and they're in a situation where their Google Analytics setup is not collecting data. And I ultimately laid down 3 options for them. One is to just be honest. They have never looked at their analytics data. They're never likely to be. Just ignore it. Let the sleeping dogs lie. 2, do a very simple implementation of Google Analytics 4, just at a very base level. The Google Sitekit plugin is a good way to do this. It doesn't exploit all the bells and whistles available, and it probably takes about half an hour to set up. That's one option. And the third option is to go boots and all. And I can tell you right now, we have to be all hands on deck for a number of hours to put Google Analytics 4 into place properly. If we really want to suck the marrow out, it means putting in Google Tag Manager, creating a number of the queries that are set up there, then connect that to Google Analytics, and then have that output captured in Google's Data Studio, or Looker Studio as it's called, so that you have meaningful reports you can look at the end. It's a beautiful, elegant system. It just takes a lot to set up. And I think for this particular client, option 1, not the best, because what if you suddenly do realize that, oh, heck, I really should make use of analytics, you've got nothing. Option 2 is probably where they're going to settle, because we like to bring pragmatism to the small business space, not always the super idealism. So it's horses for courses.
Our 4 Ps. Number 4, perspicacity. The one duty we owe to history is to rewrite it. Oscar Wilde.
David Olney, if you had to teach a kid to ride a bike. Why can't you do it in a seminar?
Well, I would have thought this was a practical question until I actually read the book. But what I would think is you can't teach a kid to ride a bike at a seminar because they're going to get all shy in front of all the people, and everyone's going to have different ideas, and they're going to get overwhelmed, and they're going to put the helmet over their eyes and hide under a seat.
Perfect. That is the opening for this series of 9 parts of the Perspicacity segment, this series, where we're looking at a book by David Sandler called You Can't Teach a Kid to Ride a Bike in a Seminar. And it is his story of how he developed the Sandler selling system, which he learned through the School of Hard Knocks. He had some psychological input along the way, and he basically came up with a take on selling that isn't horrible. It involves persuasion, but it's not brute force bluntery and rote hope that old selling systems are. And so as part of this, he comes up with a concept called the Sandler submarine, which has 7 parts to it. And so for episodes 2, 3 through 8, we will cover those. But I thought we should just set up why David and I have been quite enamored of this man, David Sandler. What is it that has impressed you by his work, particularly as captured in this book?
Well, I think there's 2 parts to that question. First, how did I crash into Sandler? And then why was I impressed once I found it? So the reason I crashed into it is because I kept seeing the same thing, whether it was here working with you or working in America. And that was so many people make an amazing product. Then they talk to really good marketing people like us. And at some point, someone has to deal with a sales team. And the sales team seem to have a different history of using different tools and interacting with people in a different way. And I saw this constant tension where the people who made great products and the people who did great marketing got things to the point where they went, okay, well, all we have to do now is let the salespeople get on with it. And they were very often disappointed or dismayed by how sales was handled in a traditional way, because it took good products and it took good marketing and then turned them into a pressure cooker of you're going to buy, you're going to buy, you're going to buy, because I'm going to pressure you into buying. And most of us don't like that. And as I found when I was doing the research for my master's thesis on inbound marketing, the guys at HubSpot would basically say that pressure selling was dead by 2005 at the latest. It just doesn't know it's dead. And I certainly knew that was true from all my research, and seeing that pressure selling wasn't working here, wasn't working in the US, and lots of people would come up with, no, you can sell this way, no, you can sell this way. But most of these books seem to me to be only about making the author rich and about some sales model they'd used in one industry for one short period of time. It had made them very rich, but then didn't really look transferable. And then with my job in America, we were looking to start retraining our salespeople. And, I'd been asked by Rich, the founder of Speakeasy Marketing, to go, okay, go find stuff on sales that doesn't make your skin crawl, that you actually think is credible and actually treats people with respect. And I'm like, this is going to be quite a task, because I knew my dad had always done sales in this respectful, human-centered way. And I asked him, how did you come up with that approach? He said, I just did it. I'm like, oh, great. So I'm probably not going to find a book. And yet when I started digging, I ran into David Sandler and the Sandler sales system. And initially I'm like, wow, a sales system that treats people with respect. Wow, a sales system that is based on a good understanding of psychology. Wow, this must be a cult. How can this keep working? How can this do a decent job? And the more I dug and the more I read, and the more I talked to people who'd been trained in Sandler or were Sandler trainers, the more I realized, hang on, this has just been quietly growing across the world, literally since the late 1960s, helping people in all sorts of industries, in all sorts of places, sell in a respectful way that doesn't wreck them as the salesperson and doesn't apply undue pressure to the person who needs to buy a product. And I thought, okay, it's not a cult. It's just actually really good. Reasonably difficult to start in because it's against what we all think we know about sales. And you have to put the effort in to learn it, which means a lot of people start but don't succeed because they won't do the reinforcement to lock it in. Sorry for the long answer there, listeners, but it really was a long path to going, this is genuinely credible and useful and is worth my and Steve's effort to learn it, and hopefully your effort and benefit from listening and applying it.
And we'll get into some practical things for each of the next 7 episodes. But to round out our overview and introduction to him, I think he nails something very important about either salespeople or those of us who need to embrace the sales role as part of our lives. And that is this concept of your role and your identity with that role. He notices that people attracted to sales tend to be people who guard jealously their self-esteem. Their self-esteem is on the line with every interaction they have with people, which leads to a hideous cocktail of despair and triumph and despair and triumph. It's a roller coaster. And it has this wonderful little exercise early in the book in which he asks us, and in fact, do this as you're listening to this. Just imagine that you are going to be dropped onto a tropical island, just a tiny little island, just with you, be pleasantly. You'll only be there for a few minutes. That's it. Then you'll back out again. Think about how you would rate yourself out of 10 in that situation. So just close your eyes. You've been dropped onto this island. Look around. Got the warm wind, the white sand, the blue sea, the green palm trees there. You're only there for a few minutes. How do you rate yourself out of 10? Now, his insight here is when we give the score, and a lot of people tend to put themselves somewhere between 5, 6, 7, thereabouts, is that is your ranking as your identity, is how you think about yourself. It's not how you are as a role, because in that beautiful idyllic state, you'd have no responsibility as a mother, father, child, sister, brother, whatever it might be. And this insight is, grab hold of where that is. He would argue you should have 10. We are all magnificent as ourselves. Where we get dented is how we've gone with a particular sales call. If you've done really well, you might score 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If you've done badly, you might score 1, 2, or 3. He's trying to disconnect the rating we give ourselves on our role compared to the intrinsic value of ourselves as the identity. And here's his insight. He has an example of, John, let's call him John, a salesperson who ranks himself as a 6 out of 10 identity-wise. If he goes out and has a great day selling that deserves 10 as a role, he'll think, well, I'm good, but I'm not that good. And he'll round down his enjoyment and appreciation to somewhere close, a point either side of his identity score. Likewise, if he has a bad day, he might say, no, I'm better than this, and he might rank himself more like 4 or 5. And what David Sandler was saying is, if we're not clear on fully understanding that as an integral human, we rank as 10 out of 10 intrinsically, we will always be at the mercy of our score in relation to anything we do. And thinking that through, and obviously hearing him talk about it will be more eloquent, but I think, David, that captures probably the most profound insight to set up the value of the Sandler system.
In the world of selling, you can't control what the prospect is going to say, and your day is filled with rejection and a lot of negative self-talk. So what he was saying is you use the castle as your safe spot, your identity. So no matter what happens in the outside world, no one can affect your self-esteem, your self-concept without your permission. Don't let it happen. And I think that's true. If you really think about it, success lies between your ears, and you can talk yourself in or out of anything. I know that I play golf, and I'm a mediocre golfer, and I go to the water hole, and I look out there, and it's 240, and I say to myself, I can do it, but maybe not today. So what do, Gerhard? I say, don't hit the water, don't hit the water, as I walk back to get water balls. And I've automatically said to myself, I'm not going to get there, right? So that's the first thing. And so I think we have to control what goes on in the outside world not to affect us. The second thing is put a spacesuit on. And so when you are out there, let rejection bounce off you. Let people, take you for free consulting and let it bounce off you. And then the third concept is no afterburn or reach back, which means once you're in the castle and you review all the things that have happened to you, don't go back and second guess and feel bad for weeks. When people lose a deal, they're moping around. You say, hey, look forward, all right? So you can look back and learn, but look forward, and that's really where you need to focus in on. And that was the analogy of you're in your own castle and no one can enter without your permission.
You have to make peace with this idea before you can use the rest of the book, because doing sales well or badly makes you feel very vulnerable. And it's something that you and I talked about. Hey, here we are as marketing guys, but we realized, but even we have to go out and sell our marketing ability. And is it one of the most uncomfortable things we have to do in our job? Yeah. Why? Because when we're doing marketing stuff, we know we're pretty talented. But when you have to go and sell what you can create, you've got the vulnerability of rejection. And, when I was teaching at university and I was teaching stuff to do with security, I came across all this literature about what's called moral injury. And it's that people in a lot of emergency services professions in the military, the harm they suffer is not post-traumatic stress. It's moral injury for seeing and having to do things that make them feel diminished. And I realized when I listened to the Sandler book that this is what he'd got his head around 40 years earlier, literally 40 years earlier. Hang on. Your identity is always fine. You are always you, and you are always the amazing you are. Your role is a different thing. Your role is what you do during the day. And you can do your role well, or you can do it badly. And sometimes you need to learn new things to do your role well. But that doesn't ever diminish you as the integral person you are outside of your role and in the world broadly. And it's such a powerful idea. And even if it takes you a couple of days to go out and buy the book and to start reading along with us, please go away and reflect on the fact that whatever number you give yourself for your identity, you are never less than that. Like, I struggle to give myself a number higher than 8 out of 10. I don't know why. I'm going to keep thinking about that. But, I feel comfortable calling myself an 8 out of 10 as a human being. And I'm not sure why I don't give myself the 2 extra points. But I'm just glad I didn't give myself a 4.
Exactly. And I think this is fitting for the perspicacity segment, which is thinking about how we think about things, is how we think about ourselves, and get that embedded. So let's close with this thought, because I know there's a certain voice that some listeners will have, is that, well, if I gave myself a 10 out of 10, there's no room to grow. And David Sandler has a wonderful comeback to this. He tells the story of being in a group saying, okay, let's just work this through. Imagine you are a seed, okay? So a seed of a rose plant. How do you rank the seed as far as its identity?
Its rosiness.
Yes. And people say, well, obviously it's a 10, because how could it be anything other? It's a 10 out of 10. So you then plant that seed and it sprouts and you have these stems growing. What do you give them? Well, 10, obviously, because there's nothing wrong with them. They're perfect stems. And then when the rose flower forms, it's there. It's a rose. It gets 10. And he's making the point that you can be 10 out of 10 at any point along the journey. It doesn't mean there's nowhere else to grow. And on that, I hope this little journey, episode 1 of series 3, has planted a seed in your mind. Whether or not, it'd be great if you read along with us, but whether or not you do, I hope there'll be plenty more that will sprout from this.
Thank you for listening to Talking About Marketing. If you enjoyed it, please leave a rating or a review in your favourite podcast app. And if you found it helpful, please share it with others. Steve and David always welcome your comments and questions, So send them to podcast@talkedaboutmarketing.com. And finally, the last word to Oscar Wilde. There's only one thing worse than being talked about, and that's not being talked about.
Hi, Jeremy Cordeaux in the Court of Public Opinion. I'm just on air here to let you know that we'll be live streaming the Court of Public Opinion every Friday between 9 o'clock and 12 on jeremycordeaux.com. Please join us. We'd love to have you.